Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio!
Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. And with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other world. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Hello and welcome, friends, readers, listeners, and viewers from across America and around the world. I am your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio. I hope that you are in a place where you're nice and cool. It was very hot today. And I realized that over the past week in the Southwest, there have been record levels of heat and that many are suffering from it. It's unfortunate. It's not terrible here in Georgia, but this week we have seen the heat index rise, and we are in what feels like triple digits, even though we're still 90, 91, 92 degrees. But I hope you are, wherever you are, maybe getting into some water and able to cool yourself off in that regard. It's unfortunate that the Southwest is also suffering record levels of drought in that Lake Powell and Lake Mead. The two largest dams serving the southwestern corner of the United States, that they are depleted, so much so that Hoover Dam may be forced to shut down to where it won't be able to produce any electricity to serve that area. And it's hot there, especially in the summer months in the desert and Las Vegas. If they were not able to have electricity to keep themselves cool, that would be pretty critical. And then you have the whole weirdness of Yellowstone, that there's record levels of snow melt and rain, and that it is flooding the river that follows along, and that the streets and highways going through Yellowstone and down into Jackson Hole, Wyoming, they have been broken up, and many people have lost their homes. So very strange, of course, that in the north you have record levels of flooding and snowmelt, and in the Southwest, record levels of depletion. It just shows the extreme. But again, I hope that no matter where you are in the world, that life is finding you in good health and well-being, and that you and your families are well taken care of, and that you are fortunate and blessed. I believe that this evening I will be on by myself, and I will be doing a show on the Thracian Chronicles, but I did see the thumbnail that
That will be tomorrow
uh,
night.
oh, that's tomorrow night. So we are doing the protocols this evening. Is that correct?
That is accurate.
Okay, good. Well, let me shift gears, and well, always an honor and a pleasure to be joined by my son Justin James, and I do love going through this series and reading about the protocols and covering and studying and bringing it forth to the listening audience. And so, yeah. So, how have you been, son? How was the journey to Savannah and the vacation on the beach?
It was great. We did take Eliana for her first visit to the ocean. We went to the coast here in Georgia, and it was extremely hot. It is extremely hot. We are going to be hitting the hundreds this week and next week, which is very hot for Georgia. We do have tropical weather here, so it's not too surprising, but yeah, it is very, very hot, and we basically all got a little bit of sunburn except for Eliana because she was very well covered up. But,
That's good.
yeah, it was a really awesome time getting to see her. She loves swimming, and then being able to go into the ocean was just an amazing experience for her. So great blessing. The ocean did take a prize in the form of my glasses, so I'll have to get some new ones of those.
Oh no!
But it's all right. We still made it home safely. Hallelujah.
That's good.
Yeah, good to see everybody tonight. Welcome if you are joining over on the YouTube live stream. Awesome to see you, Brick, Adrian, cover to cover with Jeremy, Zach, Mindy, Mika, Warren, Godsman, 144K, Shay, Joseph, Free Mistress, Loma, Linda. Yeah, awesome to see you all, Paladin. And sorry if I missed you over there, but hey, Lisa. And yeah, really excited to continue our study tonight. I don't think we even made it through the first protocol last, I guess 2 weeks ago now. But
it's a very long protocol.
Yeah, it is long, and it's really interesting. It's very intricate, and I think that it will continue to prove a challenge to read, but it will be a really good discussion because what you see, as we discussed plenty in our last show, was how these people really do believe that they are like a chosen people. They think that they're greater than us, that we as normal human beings have no capability to govern ourselves, and we're like sheep that need a shepherd, and they believe that they are that shepherd. Of course, we know that that is not the case. The true shepherd is sitting at the right hand of the throne of the Most High right now, sitting on the throne, sitting at the right hand of the Father. And that is the true Lamb of God. And yeah, so he is the true king. He's the creator. He is the vessel that the creator operated through in this world when he did come into this world, what we believe to be about 2022 years ago. And he did live a perfect life, fulfilling prophecies that was given to mankind from even thousands of years before his incarnation. And he fulfilled those prophecies, lived a perfect life, died as the true Passover lamb on the Hebrew feast of Passover, and was offered as the sacrifice for the wages of the sins of the entire world. And anyone who does come to understand that truth and does understand the testimonies that they are true, that he did defeat death because he is the creator. Obviously, death could not hold him. Those who come to have faith in that and believe in their hearts that he rose from the dead, they have part in that kingdom, the true kingdom with the true shepherd. And that's the whole moral of the story here. Everything that we're reading tonight is very interesting because, as we said, it is written by an enemy. There is a very real enemy in the world. There is a very real organized evil, and believe it or not, the organized evil has been on this earth longer than the good has been on the earth. And so the fallen angels, that you see throughout cultures around the world, the Sumerian mythology, all the way to Egyptology, and of course, with the Hindu religion, all of those polytheistic cultures that spread through the Greeks and the Romans, they all do have a little bit of validity. The ancient aliens does have a little bit of truth in there, but of course it is mixed with lie. You are not meant to be a slave to the Sumerian Anunnaki, the fallen angels. They were actually meant to serve you. And unfortunately, there was a rebellion of angels, and they did have high technology. They do have high technology that they passed down through their generations, but that is the evil that was on the earth before even mankind was made on the earth. And they have operated and monopolized control over governments, over everything that you could call a powerful entity in the world through pharmaceutical industries, militaries, all, of course, governments, and most especially through banks. And all of that monopolized control is something that seems fake, seems conspiratorial, right? But if you do your research and your history, you see nothing's changed. Just the faces that sit on the thrones and the names of the different types of philosophical governments that they control. But what's interesting with this text is we see that they utilize all of the different types of governments, and they have different ways and methods of operating in each of those governments to maintain their own control. And above all, we know that all the wars that our children are sent to be an offering for the big governments, all of those are banker wars. All of those are just unnecessary. Really, it's propped up evil, and it's really crazy to think that we funded the Nazis, right? But historically, it's an accurate statement. We fund the Nazis. We fund both sides of every war. Well, not we as in me and you, but the bankers, the people who are behind the Federal Reserve that controls the American government.
Yes, they do like to support controlled opposition in order to cull the masses, and we see that is one of their most favored directives. And they have taught and teach, especially to their mystery schools and those that do take blood oath and follow them in allegiance. They perpetuate the idea that the earth is overpopulated, and that there's only a limited amount of resource, and that the numbers of people is just out of control. And so they have to implement ways and manners to cull and also to reduce the populations, and whatever front and whatever attack, whatever strategy they can. And that is also part of this text. And even though it sounds bizarre, I mean, especially for those that are not have never looked into the New World Order or the Illuminati agenda, the whole, even the United Nations and how they have the Global 2000 and things of that nature is the way to sustain population and growth and all of that. They have things in place to work out this agenda and to target innocents, to slaughter innocents, and to do it all in the guise of governance. So let us continue so we can maybe make it through a few of these protocols this evening. And hello and welcome all of you that have joined us in the live broadcast. Just if you'd like to join a fellowship, Zen Garcia is the live stream on our YouTube channel, and you can join there with all the others that have come to listen and be part of this broadcast.
All right, let's go over, and I think we ended off with verse 26. So
yes,
let's read through this one again. We were in the middle of discussing that one when we got cut off by the end of the show last week. So let's continue here in Protocol 1, verse 26. In all corners of the earth, the words liberty, equality, fraternity brought to our ranks, thanks to our blind agents whose whole legions who bore our banners with enthusiasm. And all the time these words were cankerworms at work, boring into the well-being of the Goyim, putting an end everywhere to peace, quiet, solidarity, and destroying all the foundations of the Goya states. Alright, so just a disclaimer here. If you are unfamiliar with Goya, the Goyim, and what all this means, definitely go back and listen to some of the previous episodes where we thoroughly discuss who the Zionists are, who the true Zionists are, and who the Goyim are according to what these people believe. So let's continue on. As you will see later, this helped us to our triumph. It gave us the possibility, among other things, of getting into our hands the Master Card, the destruction of the privileges, or in other words, of the very existence of the aristocracy of the Goyim, that class, which was the only defense peoples and countries had against us. Interesting. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Apparently, these are the things that they think is like the end-all be-all for their rule and reign. I guess it kind of reminds me of the satanic commandments, right? It's like, do what thou wilt, right? So like, in a place where there's no rule, there's no Torah, there's no 10 Commandments, where you have full liberty, and then you have equality, which, they can utilize equality in different ways, equal suffering, equal reward, bringing people down, bringing other people up, and then finding their own middle ground on which to put everyone else, that brand of equality. They can actually suppress people. That's kind of like a communist agenda, right? And then fraternity. I feel like Freemasonry and all these little organizations that they have out there make people feel like they have power. These people feel like they have won the game of the rat race. They are able to, control real estate and have successful businesses and part in like big franchises, so they aren't suffering like the rest of the people, right? So interesting that they have these type of things, and they think that this is what they said, the destruction, the MasterCard, the destruction of the privileges, or in other words, of the very existence of the aristocracy of the Goyim, a class which was the only defense peoples and countries had against us. That's really interesting. So they think that they have complete dominance now, right?
Yes, and that they're the only ones that have the ability to step in the way and to stop the agenda that they are starting and perpetuating and pushing forward. That the rest of us, the useless eaters, the Goyim, that we don't have enough intelligence or capability to do anything about what they are, pushing forth in the protocols. And of course, they believe themselves to be the chosen, the elect, and that the rest of us are just useless eaters. And they boast, about this in seemingly every protocol. They're laughing at, making fun of, flashing the Masonic gang signs, and hiding things in plain sight just because it gives them a good laugh. And so, but yeah, that's how cocky and boastful They are.
Interesting. They talk about the aristocracy of the Goyim. What do you think was the aristocracy of the Goyim?
Well, those that are, of course, like that are Jews, that say they're Jews but are not. The Gentile nations and the people that sat on the thrones of those particular worlds that were not part of Israel, and that are utilized by them to, they prop up dictatorships. They use certain nations, and prop up and also allow those nations to get out of control in order so that they can crack down. The whole controlled opposition and the way that they utilize the way things are happening in the world, even certain wars, and the way that they contrive and perpetuate them, even like the way 9/11 was used to invade Iraq and Afghanistan and to start all of the wars and the struggles in the Middle East, and how there's still, insanity, so much so that there's breeding grounds for the real terrorists and terrorism that they are also supporting and funding and creating, like ISIS and Al Qaeda and the Taliban, even all these. They gave Afghanistan to the Taliban and abandoned all the women and the people that were fighting for America and the so-called American dream of liberty, just left them there to die, to be killed, to be assassinated, and gave all of that equipment to the Taliban. Like just left it all to them so that they could have this, all this arsenal and all of this equipment to further their extremism. It's absolutely insane, and yet this is what America did with their so-called push for liberty in those countries. Insanity.
Yeah, that's total insanity. Everything that happened with all that, of course, anyone in their right mind would see that something is definitely up with that when you go from being a nation that doesn't negotiate with terrorists to all of a sudden being the ones that arm them. That's exactly. It's not. There's no accident there. That was
right.
Somebody would be getting the death penalty if that was an accident. That's right. Like straight up treason. But anyways, the back to the point of the question, I was talking about the very existence of the aristocracy of the Goyim, which was the class that was the only defense peoples and countries had against us, the Zionists. So this kind of brings cognitive dissonance to me, because a lot of people that we have on here even talk about the royalties from around the world, how they're all part of that NWO,
Right.
So I'm a little confused, because in this text it's saying that they were actually a class that could have defended their nations if they didn't fall into Freemasonry, like the fraternity that we saw up above.
Right. Well, you have to look at the history of even the royalty, and how in ancient times in the different countries, there were these other royal families, and these kind of families have been fighting and waging battles and for control of the nations, even with Alexander and his generals when he died, that they struggled to fight against each other for control of the world. That there were peoples and nations that came up that know about even here in America, Jackson fought against the central banks, and how John F. Kennedy and also Abraham Lincoln, they fought against the central banks and tried to keep the Federal Reserve System from coming into place, from subjugating our right to coin and mint, which Congress should have that ability and capacity, but they surrendered it to the Federal Reserve System long ago. But there have been people, and there have been knowledgeable aristocracy, like even in Russia. Russia, the Tsar Nicholas and his whole family, and how they were a balance of power, even during the wars here in America, the Civil War, that the Russians came and placed their ships and aided America at that time to fight off the British and the tyranny. And for those that don't know, at that time, Tsar Nicholas, his family, they were also part of the control system of the royals in Great Britain, and also that sat in the German the German nation, and one of their cousins sat on that particular throne. And so these families ruled, but then when they have been fighting against each other, they fund other means of overthrow in order that they can continue to increase their power and control. And so the Bolsheviks were utilized to set up the tyranny of communism, and to overthrow the royal family in that particular part of the world. But there have been many times, in many instances, where cousins fighting cousins, or brothers fighting brothers, were these royal families, and they know that about the agenda. They know about the inside of what they have been and wanting to create for a long time. But the New World Order has struggles even within itself, and these battles take place to where certain factions try to overthrow and control. And this has happened to, like, you have the Saxberg-Coburg family, which they're supposed to be of a certain bloodline, but they're not. They're imposters. And again, I don't know all the great details on this, but I do know that this has happened, and this kind of struggle amongst these families and these elitists has taken place for a very long time, to the point where they've assassinated each other and one another in the same way that the Caesars of Rome, the ancient families, they fought for control and tried to subjugate and to subvert one another. And so in taking over a lot of these aristocracies, overthrowing these particular families, they put into place other agent provocateurs, things like Bolshevism, stuff like that. Even the Zionists, in Israel, that the power was given to them, and that there's a larger, like the Black Pope, and that whole structure of control, which most people don't know about, and which Eric John Phelps, he does a lot to write about and to expose how all that works, and the Freemasonic brotherhoods. But there's a larger structure, and I believe that Satan, of course, is at the top of that and controls and rules over that. But the ground, the foot soldiers, the royal elites, the Council of Nine, and those that are part of the governance, that they are utilized, and that they do sometimes have war amongst themselves, but that they have been the the Israeli Zionists, the synagogue of Satan, those who say they are not Jews, they have been attacking and overthrowing Goyim nations even in this day and age. And that part of the destruction of America is part of that as well. And that the implementation, the bringing forth the communism, and giving power and control to China and Russia, that has been part of the plan for a very long time. And it's something that has been worked on. The way that the dollar is now being destroyed, and the ruble, and also the Chinese yuan, has been brought up and now is backed by gold. The way China, was a third world nation, and how they are now a very wealthy and rich nation, that they've been, the people that are there have been, they're a creditor nation. They buy our debt, and they purchase gold, uh, and have huge amounts of it, whereas most of the other nations of the world do not have those kind of reserves. And so it has been, uh, many generations, many decades, many even centuries, that the power shift has been planned and put into place. And so that those kind of things are the New World Order working behind the scenes to prop up and to destroy. Like whereas America had once been the shining beacon on the hill, that we were the nation which all other nations feared and tried to be like, we've been destroyed from the inside. Our values and our freedoms, and everything has been, we're now so complacent, and the people, as they said, are stupid, and the things and the dreams and the goals, whereas they used to be something of value, and that we were very productive people. Now we're so complacent, we're just like a zombie nation that is watching ourselves being destroyed. I mean, the homelessness and the crime in cities now, the way that the police have been decimated and no longer have control or ability to fight against the crime that is just growing and growing. It's insane. We're turning into a third world nation, without a doubt. But I don't know if that gave you any more insight into what you're asking. But the New World Order does utilize control in opposition, and has taken down even their own people and the controllers in just the same way they did Saddam Hussein in Iraq. They do those kind of things everywhere in order to continue with what they see as their bigger agenda.
Yeah, I guess you have to go back through history. I suppose they overthrow one by one those aristocratic
Right.
families, and then put in their imposters, or just bring in, I guess these days, what they call democracy, right? Like what we
Right.
saw with Iraq and Libya, and all the things
Yes.
that are going on over there. That makes sense. So some people in the chat were talking about in 1948, of course, from World War I to the end of World War II, how basically before that, the European royalty were all Christians, and then they became inbred with the Talmudists, and and you see the Zionist state of Israel propped up.
Zionists, right.
So, not really sure what to think about that, but it definitely makes sense. I don't think that the royalty anywhere is like the Most High's chosen rulers for the world or anything like that. But having blood going back to King David is interesting. I assume that the Zionists even the Talmudic Zionists, of course, that are talking about this probably think that they have blood going back to David too. I'm not really sure.
They declare that through the Merovingian stuff as well, and then they perpetuate the whole idea that Christ had children here with Mary Magdalene, and that their bloodlines are the kings that came about of that particular bloodline. They call this Sangreal, blood royal, and that's also part of the lie that they perpetuate. But that's a whole nother thing. The Dan Brown and the all of that Mary Magdalene stuff that they talk about and declare as truth.
There were some interesting movies, but definitely not.
Yeah, right.
Not anything that scriptures actually speak on. So,
right.
All right, so we'll continue on. It says, on the ruins of the eternal and genealogical aristocracy of the Goyim, we have set up the aristocracy of our educated class, headed by the aristocracy of money. Qualifications for this aristocracy we have established in wealth, which is dependent upon us, and in knowledge, for which our learned elders provide the motive force. So,
yeah,
same thing we see going back. But go ahead, you wanted to comment?
I was just going to say that ever since the Knights Templar and the way that they were able to establish international banking to where you could deposit your gold in one portion of a city and then travel to Jerusalem and use that same receipt to pull gold out at the other end, that international banking and commerce, that's, what helped them to become very, very powerful, and the control of that. Like we know about the Rothschild family because they were, some of those that set up these banks to where they could perpetuate these kind of interactions. And so the bankers and economics and those that, like the Federal Reserve System, how it's so powerful here. And most people don't even know that it's not even, legal that Congress should be managing commerce and the minting of coin. And yet, they gave up the power to the central banking system for them to print the money and loan it to the governments at interest. I mean, that is true power. And it is a illegal Ponzi scheme, which has been ongoing since 1913. And the wealth that has been stolen and siphoned off from the wages and earnings of the American people, that money has been utilized to do exactly as they say, with their perpetuating these 3 world wars as a means to bring forth a one world order. And that the end goal of that one world order is to bring forth their king despot, as we'll get into as we move more and more through this particular manuscript. But yes, the power of commerce and the control of it, the Ponzi scheme of printing money and loaning it to the governments of the world, the IMF, all of that, loaning debt to nations, it's all a matrix of control, which they've utilized perfectly to subjugate all the nations of the world to debt, and which that is their power.
Yeah, and we've just been continually driven into the ground, right? I mean, when you don't export as much as you import, there's an issue. And we are continually just digging further and further into debt. But it's so tricky how they operate. But that was interesting, going back to the Knights Templar, of course, and the establishment of that international banking system. I feel like even before that, they were establishing citywide banking systems, it's all been kind of a progressive part of their agenda to establish that. international empire. So now,
Yeah.
with the Knights Templar, you see the beginning of that real international web. You know, the World Wide Web growing.
Right.
Really.
I was just going to say really quickly, this is why we see in the scriptures that the Most High does not like people to loan money at interest, and does not like the powers and the systems of control that come up that do this exact thing, because he realizes and understands how much power they're able to glean and to gain by doing that exact thing. And so that's why it's such a no to loan money at interest in the scriptures.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's really interesting. I guess a lot of, depending on the scripture that you read, it says that the Hebrews shouldn't loan interest to each other, or shouldn't give loans with interest to each other, but to the Goyim, that it was all right. So I guess they have their justification there, but they have definitely utilized that to establish insane amounts of control. And when you loan somebody $100 and you expect them to pay $107 back, if they started with zero, there's no way for them to make that $7, right? It's just unless they have some service or goods that they're making to get that extra $7 from some other currency that they could then pay back their debt. But every currency has debt, So it's a downward spiral for the entire world, and it definitely see that that establishment for the despot king is definitely in place. Definitely in place. A lot of people talk about the the whole Great Reset and everything, how there are people that are getting ready to forgive all the debts around the world. Like there's, I forget exactly the Saint Germain something, the trust or whatever, that they have so much gold. Nasara, Gassara. Yeah. When the Antichrist or the false Messiah is revealed, that they're going to just forgive everybody's debt, because it's all made up anyways, right? But then the people are going to be like, oh, yay, oh, praise to the despot king.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. Well, we got through one verse. It's only been 44 minutes, so let's continue
Progress.
on. Yes. All right, verse 27. Our triumph has been rendered easier by the fact that in our relations with the men whom we wanted, we have always worked upon the most sensitive chords of the human mind, upon the cash account, upon the cupidity, upon the insatiability for material needs of men. And each one of these human weaknesses taken alone is sufficient to paralyze initiative, for it hands over the will of men to the disposition of him who has bought their activities. That's interesting. It's not surprising that in so many different ways they've figured out how to disarm people, not just with weapons, but with entertainment and with the rat race, with the need for a new Gucci bag or a need for
materialism.
I don't know, anything that you see in all the ads, you want to beat that person. You got to work hard so you can afford it. So yeah.
Yes.
All right, so going on, the abstraction of freedom has enabled us to persuade the mob in all countries that their government is nothing but the steward of the people who are the owners of the country, and that the steward may be replaced like a worn-out glove. That's very true. That's definitely what we're under the illusion of, that we're a government for the people, by the people, right?
Right.
Big fat joke, in my opinion.
Yes.
I think this is the last verse. It says, it is this possibility of replacing the representatives of the people, which has placed at our disposal, and, as it were, given us the power of appointment. And it makes sense. all the campaigns for who's going to be the president, who's going to be the prime minister,
Right.
who's going to be, your governor or your mayor or whatever. It's all really about money, right? Who gets the best marketing? You can afford good
Yes.
marketing, and you are, going to get the most votes.
And then after you get into office, it's who controls the purse strings, who gets to
Right.
give out the government contracts.
Mhm.
What companies could even qualify to ask for those contracts. So yeah, it's always big money.
Yeah. Somebody said I have my mic gain too high. Sorry. Just let me know if I'm speaking too loud. I'll move the mic a little bit further away from my mouth. But yeah, a really interesting first protocol there. Oh, a lot. They control banks,
Yes.
they control education centers, they control militaries, and they control the governments.
Yes.
Makes perfect sense. And then, of course, here they have the dog and pony show where they give that whole illusion that, you can have power in the left hand or the right hand, but, obviously both hands are part of the same body, right?
Yes.
Let's check out what you got going on here. This image, it says, war is the greatest debt creator known to man. That's so true. Why do we resist the idea that both sides of wars are typically funded by the same bankers? Are we scared of the implications? Could they be manipulating the wars into happening for their own profits? Oh, that sounds like a conspiracy theory to me.
Yes, of course. They wouldn't do that.
Of course
They
not.
love us.
Governments are represented by the representatives of the people.
Yes,
Of the people
exactly.
of all nations, of their respective nations. Yeah, we know
Yes.
that's definitely a lie. If you just look,
Yes.
well, we're gonna get shut down on our YouTube channel if we talk about specifics, right? But the 2020 vote is a
Right.
very good example of that, and just the fact that so much nonsense has taken place over the past year, a year and a half. Where the current office has just done so much ridiculous stuff. Like you said with Afghanistan, it's like that's like
Right.
there's no sense to it. I feel like they really just did it to laugh at us, and maybe they did this whole installation of their puppet, which either way it's a puppet, right?
Right.
But they put this puppet on just because they wanted to laugh and then create division, of course. They're creating more and more division. It's really unfortunate that you see so much hatred out in the world. People hate each other so much, and they make all of these divisions. They
Right.
fuel the racist divisions, the gender divisions, your sports team divisions, your
Right.
statism, nationalism. They fuel all of these divisions and create hatred, and then of course through division they conquer. All right, so moving on
Yes.
to Protocol
They're
2.
expert at it. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to comment before we move on into Protocol 2?
Just again, that it's absolutely correct, and the more that people wake up to the whole controlled opposition and the false left-right paradigm, and the more people can remove themselves from supporting Democrat or Republican or this political party or that, the more you'll save your energy and time for doing things that you really need to do, like looking into salvation and the truth of prophecy, of where we are in this day and age, being the fig tree generation. There are greater things happening than all the political tirades and charades and the dog and pony show of politics that is being played out every day in the so-called left and right media. It's all controlled. It's all just a waste of time, and people really need to realize that.
Yeah, definitely. Let's move on to Protocol 2. This is on economic wars. All right, so short description about the chapter says routine scientific government, Darwinism, Marxism, Nietzscheism, and press inculcated mentality. So I have to make a comment on something that we saw today when we were out getting smoothies. It was so hot. The smoothie was so good. But when we were leaving, we saw there's a big sticker on this car that was parked next to us. And it made me laugh out loud, like very loudly. It said, the good thing about science is that it's true whether you believe it or not. And then, of course, at the bottom, it was a quote by Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Right, of course.
I just wanted to put like prophet and priest.
Yes. Right.
What a crazy world that people are so indoctrinated, so like just given over in belief to whatever these theories say, these scientific theories, and they don't even recognize that they are theories that these scientists push forward as evident truths, but it's not. It's not evident truths, It's really, is the Earth flying through space, and rotating at 1,000 miles an hour or 10,000 miles an hour or whatever, and are we really just apes?
Right. And why are they still with us in the same way that they are?
Right.
If we evolved with them, I mean, yeah, it's lunacy.
Well, I can give you one example to just put Darwinism or evolution down the drain. They say it's mutations. That's how evolution occurs, right? It's mutations. But in order for a mutation to occur, you have to have reproduction. Where did the reproductive system come from? It's so complex. It's so complex. It's so complex. It's amazing watching. I don't know how many of you out there have either had a child, given birth to a child, or watched your wives, grow with child inside of them, and then all of a sudden there comes this baby. That is an extremely complex system, and they're saying that's the only way for mutations to occur, So how did the reproduction evolve? It didn't evolve. It's dumb, but the good thing about science is that it's true whether you believe it or not.
Or not. Exactly.
I tend to disagree, that it's just really funny. It just shows how faithful people are.
Right.
I just reading about
it's a religion.
Yeah. It really is. Yeah, scientism is a religion. I was just that brought to mind when it said routine scientific government. Routine scientific government. I guess they're probably talking about governing science, but Darwinism, Marxism, Nietzscheism, of course, they say God is dead. Yeah, you're crazy. Right. People say that all the time when you share the gospel with them. You're like, God is dead, man. Like, move on. You're so outdated. And you're like, no, you're still here. The Creator is definitely still perpetuating creation.
Right.
All right. Let's move on. We still have a couple minutes before break. Do you want to comment, or should we just go ahead and move on?
We only have 1 minute, and so yes, the whole idea of scientism as a religion, if people don't think it is, I mean, just the fact that they're able to lie to us about where we live and the way that the earth and even the dynamics of the so-called solar system, and that the planets revolve around the sun. All these things are, when you begin to study and examine and look into them, they're lies, and they're not even really good lies, because it's so easy to disrupt and to prove wrong the things that are perpetuated and that we believe in with regard to the solar system and the dynamics of the world. And if those of us that have looked into biblical cosmology and that realize that even in the book of Enoch, thousands of years ago, the truth of the dynamics of world and that the earth is a foundation and different than the luminaries which move and circle above its face, and that they move and circle around Polaris, not the sun, which is provable even with the time-lapse photography that anybody can go out and do over the course of an evening. Everything moves in a circle around Polaris, and it's the one star that is fixed, stationary, and non-moving in the same manner that the Earth is stationary, fixed, and non-moving. So we'll be right back, everyone, for second hour.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased, as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we torture us and bomb us, fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Good evening.
Are you awake yet? I hope. We've tried and we've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. The time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia, and I'm joined by my son, Justin James, as we continue our introspection into the Illuminati Secret Covenant and the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. And we have made it through an entire protocol, and let us continue with number 2.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Catching up on a little bit of news. Some crazy things going on out there in the world. If you do have anything you'd like to share, maybe we'll be able to comment on a couple news stories. If you have some stuff, please do share it in the chat. Always interested to see some interesting stories that you don't hear too much of. I was just reading about in India, apparently there's a large Muslim protest going on, and I guess one of the Hindu spokeswomen there talked about how Muhammad had married a 6-year-old and then basically did intimate things with her when she was 9 years old, which I'm pretty sure that's in their Quran, right? But because she brought that up, everyone went crazy, and they said that she's dishonoring Muhammad, and they're calling for blasphemy laws in India, which in a lot of places there are blasphemy laws in the Muslim-dominated nations where people are beheaded or hung or stoned for insulting Muhammad, and it's crazy that they're trying to do this in India now, and now Al-Qaeda is vowing revenge that they're going to be doing suicide bombings to defend the honor of Muhammad. Crazy.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy. This is just another example of division, right? That the enemy can utilize to divide and conquer. Interesting. Think about that.
And I mean, come on, pedophilia?
Yeah.
You're going to support pedophilia? I mean, if that's if it's the only thing that you come out against, you support, the helping and taking care of the innocent, the children.
Right.
I mean, in Christ, said in the scriptures to harm one of these. I mean, it would be better for you to never have been born. And then I know that, in Alice Bailey's 10-point plan to bring on the New World Order and to destroy Christianity and family values, that they were going to set up and normalize pedophilia, or at least they were going to try, but I never expected that they would succeed. I mean, common sense tells you that's absolutely wrong. And yet, we have Mormon organizations that have been trying for a very long time to normalize this kind of behavior and to marry off young girl to 50-year-old men, have them be their third, fourth, fifth, or whatever number wife. I mean, it's insanity. And for, you have a whole faith and people just ignoring this fact. I mean, because it's not anything that's not known about. I mean, if you look into Muhammad, and I mean, this is all fact. And it's you call it what it is, and that's pedophilia. I mean, but oh my gosh, just insanity.
There was a comment on the article that said, "Now we know that Western trans liberals are not the only ones that don't like to hear the truth." Interesting. Another headline reads, 23 pro-life organizations vandalized, firebombed by pro-abortion activists in recent weeks.
Oh my gosh. That's going to get so worse.
I know. We talk about that a lot, so let's go back over to protocol number 2, economic wars. The unfortunate world situation we live in. How great is it to be able to join together and to worship the Most High, to just declare His goodness, His peace that is so much greater than all the craziness that's happening in this current world. His rule, His reign, His kingdom is eternal, and it will not be shaken or undermined or overthrown. He will rule forever, and that kingdom is accessible by everyone here. If you come to know the truth of the Creator, of His love for us, that He offered Himself on the cross for the wages of our sins, that He defeated death, He gives us that promise that even though our flesh may fail, that there is a new incorruptible body awaiting those who put their faith in Him and seek Him. And in His kingdom, it's going to be so awesome. This world sure does suck having to read all these articles all the time, and I'm sure people know what I'm talking about on your cell phone. I think like 4 or 5 times this weekend I got an Amber Alert, and you're just thinking, what in the world is... What a terrible, terrible world. But alright, let's read a little bit more about this terrible world. It is indispensable for our purpose that wars, so far as possible, should not result in territorial gains. Wars will thus be brought on to the economic ground, where the nations will not fail to perceive in the assistance we give the strength of our predominance, and this state of things will put both sides at the mercy of our international agentur, which possesses millions of eyes ever on the watch and unhampered by any limitations whatsoever. Of course, they have so much wealth that they're called the 1%, right? The 1% has more than the 99% put together. It says our international rights will then wipe out national rights in the proper sense of right, and will rule the nations precisely as the civil law of states rule the relations of their subjects among themselves. So they're talking about their New World Order, right? They're talking about, of course, we read earlier, right is might. They can conquer everything. They can put all nations to their knees, which they already do by controlling the banks and funding things like the Federal Reserve. Then they can eventually reveal their civil law. It reminds me of the Georgia Guidestones. I forget exactly which one it was, but it says establish an international court, a world court.
Right.
You're definitely going to see that occur. I feel like the UN, the EU, these are just kind of like, they're like predecessors of what's going to be the real thing. Right? They're just kind of like practice agencies for when the real beast is revealed. Want to comment on this one? We'll move on to verse 2.
Yeah. Just really quickly, that, we see the kind of laws and the kind of system and the kind of tyranny that these so-called wise men and, the learned elders, as they call themselves, just what kind of system they want to set up for the world. And yet we see that in the scriptures, God has presented his law, and how much better it would be if we were to live under his law. And so I look forward to the time where his kingdom will be established, and all the nations, whether they hate him or not, are going to be subject and brought under his rule. And what an awesome, incredible time that will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us continue on, and welcome again everybody that is joining over on the YouTube channel, and everyone at Freedom Slips. Hopefully having a great afternoon, a great evening. Continue with verse 2. The administrators whom we shall choose from among the public, with strict regard to their capacities for servile obedience, will not be persons trained in the arts of government, and will therefore easily become pawns in our game in the hands of men of learning and genius, who will be their advisors, specialists bred and reared from early childhood to rule the affairs of the whole world. That's so true, right? Like the people that are going to universities and stuff, they're learning what they're allowed to learn. There are these like private education places, like institutions that are raising people like what they're talking about here. How interesting is that? And they
Skull and Bones.
Yeah, like even the Skull and Bones, I feel like those are probably the people that they're using, right? But they're the advisors of the Skull and Bones, the ones that they proceed over the Skull and Bones, because the people like Bush and Cheney and all the presidents that joined the Skull and Bones, they were probably just pawns, right? They were just pawns who,
on the string,
they didn't have very good, even if they went to Harvard or Yale or wherever, they still didn't know nearly as much as their advisors did. And these advisors that are put in these places, we've talked about it in previous episodes, they talk about how they don't allow all knowledge to be taught in education.
Yes.
Like even if you go to the highest study of physics, you still don't know as much as these secret organizations know. They have more information that's been passed down to them than we will ever come to find out on our own, just by running mathematical equations for all of our life. They were taught directly by the fallen angels, who were present with the Most High when he was made the earth, I believe. But then
they shouted for joy when they saw the revealing of it. Yes.
Right. And then exactly. And then they even probably had friends, other angels, or co-workers that were in charge of gravity or momentum or light. Like they know the inner workings of all of these things from on a higher level than mankind can comprehend, because they come from the spirit world, right? They're like computer programmers that, imagine like a group of computer programmers came together to write some software for Bill Gates, and like they understand the inner workings of the program more than the character that's in the program will ever understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I know I kind of made Bill Gates like the creator there, but anyways.
I was just going to say it's sort of like the occult technology of power, and those 8 professors that wrote portions of, you know, the magic of economics and how they utilize the Ponzi scheme to control and assert power. You know, this is something that is above the heads and beyond the means of comprehension for the even, you know, university PhD economists majors. They still don't understand the way that the game is played, because they think that economics is a real science and that it's based on something that is you know, scientific and mathematical, and that can be learned about and understood, but yet it's magic. It's like alchemy. It's something that the elites created to control and to establish a matrix of control for society and for the people born into this world. It's, you know, a prison system that is, the shackles are in their mind. And you can't teach these kind of things in a college or in a school. Most people just would not be able to grasp it. It's just above their means of comprehension.
Yeah, really good points. Talking about alchemy, you know, with all the pharmakeia, I'm sure that they have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have a really good amount of information that we can study and be taught by going to schools, but it's not everything that they know at these private institutions. They send their, you know, people that are born into their bloodlines, people that they're rearing up for world domination. You know, that they are learning way more.
Right.
Yeah, Lisa said it's that they charge big money to get more indoctrination, right? So true.
Right.
But all right, let's continue. The administrators whom we shall choose from among the public with strict regard. Oh, we already read that part. Let's go on. Early childhood to rule the affairs of the world. As is well known to you, these specialists of ours have been drawing, to fit them for rule, the information they need from our political plans, from the lessons of history, from the observations made of the events of every moment as it passes. That's just like what we were talking about with the European Union and the United Nations. You know, they're just observing like how everything kind of works out. I feel like that was the whole like the pandemic, right? They're just throwing these things out there and observing and learning like how people react, and now they don't even have to work hard. The computers kind of show them exactly how people react. They have all of these monitoring systems, and then of course they got consent to put more and more tracking into all of our cell phones, and you know, the contact tracing, all those programs that were put on whether you wanted it on or not. They can basically just monitor everything, and they can just run a spreadsheet and look at data so easily. They're just accumulating more and more and more data on how to manipulate humans, on how to control us. And I feel like they've been doing that for thousands of years, but now we're at this age where, like they say with technology, that it's like growing at an exponential rate, right? Like it grew like so much in 10 years, but then the past 5 years it grew more than that 10 years, and then the next 2 years it's going to grow more than the past 100 years, and then the next 1 year it's going to grow more than the past 1,000 years. Like it's going to continue to grow faster and faster and faster. That's how their rulership is growing too. Like it wouldn't be any surprise to me at all. Like within the next 5 years, the false messiah has a complete domination and world government established. Like it shouldn't be surprising to any of us. We see all of these plans unfolding, especially with the mark of the beast, and you know, contact tracing with the hokey pokey, you know, microchips, and not being able to buy or sell without having to do something that you don't want to do. You know, all of these things are so unfortunately coming to pass. But it's temporary. Again, just remember it's temporary. Let's stay positive. So we'll continue. It says the Goyim are not guided by practical use of unprejudiced history or historical observation, but by theoretical routine, without any critical regard for consequent results. We need not, therefore, take any account of them. Let them amuse themselves until the hour strikes, or live on hopes of new forms of enterprising pastime, or on the memories of all they have enjoyed. It's funny, like, Facebook always gives you a memory every day. Like, look at your memories. But it's interesting. They think that there's no true revolutionaries, right? I guess the revolutionaries that they set up were just to overthrow the previous aristocracies or the previous influential families that might have stood against them, right? Just like they did with ISIS and things like that. They set up all of these protests from within big governments to just overthrow those governments and establish their own command, because of course they fund those organizations, and those organizations can't survive without their funding, right? So they therefore kind of control everything.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So for them, let that play the principal part which we have persuaded them to accept as the dictates of science. Oh, nice of them to put in parentheses here, theory, science, theory. It is with this object in view that we are constantly, by means of our press, arousing a blind confidence in these theories. Oh, well, that's so funny that we were just talking about that. Intellectuals of the Goyim will puff themselves up with their knowledge, and without any logical verification of them, will put into effect all the information available from science which our agentur specialists have cunningly pieced together for the purpose of educating their minds in the direction we want. Wow, that is so legit. Yeah, so legit. That's so Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? The priests of scientism.
Priestcraft, yes.
And like, you think about it, like a lot of college teachers or middle school teachers or high school science teachers that are teaching evolution, right? They really believe it, because they've puffed themselves up. They've become prideful in their indoctrination. Like Lisa said, they paid good money to learn that stuff.
Exactly.
And the teachers that taught them were super convinced as well. They know that we evolved from apes. Oh, they know, and it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. It's just true because it's science.
Exactly.
It's so funny. It says here, without any logical verification of them. And it's so funny if you open up an evolution, a book, and they show the paleontological record, right? There's always pictures of how this one ape evolved into a man, and every museum you go to in Washington D.C. or here at Fernbank Museum in Atlanta or anywhere where they have a scientific museum, they always have these really intense sculptures of apes, and then all of the phases of the evolution of the ape and how we ended up as a man, right? And it's none of that actually exists on the fossil record. You just have apes, and then you have man. The missing links are not there. If you read on the bottom of the graphics that are in the science books, it says, this is a cartoonist illustration. It's not real. It's a theory. But people don't want to logically verify. They're just being taught. They believe what their teacher says because their teacher believes it themselves, right?
Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
And their teachers taught them, and their teachers taught them, and
right. And then it says here the agentur specialists have cunningly pieced it all together.
Right.
For the purpose of educating their minds in the direction we want. Exactly. Brainwashing. That's crazy that they put that there. So, same as we always say, not saying this book is 100% written by some Illuminati person, but it very well could be, because this is what you see really going on in the world. If you just have an open mind, it's my belief, at least, that once you confess faith in the Messiah and come to know him, that the Holy Spirit will come to you and teach you and open your mind to real truth, and you'll become the real illuminated one, illuminated with the light of the Creator, and he will show you just how ridiculous science, not all science, of course, like science is just the study of nature, right? But the scientific theories that are sold as gospel truths, just how crazy they are.
Right.
So
it's all brainwashing.
Yeah.
I mean, when you come to the real understanding of it, when you're unplugged from the matrix, when you take the red pill, I mean, this is what the reality is. The conspiracy reality is that it's all propaganda, lies built upon lies, built upon lies.
Yep.
And they lie about everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Absolutely. It is crazy. And the things that they're able to get humans to do is really unfortunate. Right. But, for a small part, we're kind of like programmed our childhood.
Yeah.
We're like,
oh yeah,
we're just humans. We are suggestible creatures. We fall into peer pressure. We have all these biases and things that make us kind of want to follow the bandwagon. We don't really think about who's driving the bandwagon. When you decide you want to think outside the box, and when you really do get through that box and look, see the true light of Christ, you'll definitely see that the world is full of blind people leading blind people, and the person that's at the front of their caravan is someone who is absolutely doomed to destruction. He's bringing everyone to destruction with them. All right, let's continue on. Do not suppose for a moment that these statements are empty words. Think carefully of the successes we arranged for Darwinism, Marxism, Nietzscheism. To us Jews, at any rate, it should be plain to see what a disintegrating importance these directives have had upon the minds of the Goyim. It is indispensable for us to take account of the thoughts, characters, tendencies of the nations in order to avoid making slips in the political and in the direction of administrative affairs. The triumph of our system, of which the component parts of the machinery may be variously disposed, according to the temperament of the peoples met on our way, will fail of success if the practical application of it be not based upon a summing up of the lessons of the past in the light of the present. Well, fancy way of saying, learn from the past. Which they say we do not do, which is probably true. That's why the past repeats itself so often.
Right, exactly, yes.
In the hands of the states of today, there is a great force that creates the movement of thought in the people, and that is the press. The part played by the press is to keep pointing out requirements supposed to be indispensable, to give voice to the complaints of the people, to express and to create discontent. It is in the press that the triumph of freedom of speech finds its incarnation, but the Goyim states have not known how to make use of this force, and it has fallen into our hands. Through the press, we have gained the power to influence while remaining ourselves in the shade. Thanks to the press, we have got the gold in our hands, notwithstanding that we have had to gather it out of the oceans of blood and tears. But it has paid us. Though we have sacrificed many of our people, each victim on our side is worth, in the sight of God, 1,000 goyim. Yeah, that's definitely straight out of the Talmud, right?
Yes.
One Jew is worth 1,000.
Right.
Goyim.
Exactly.
But as we said before, this isn't real Israel. When they are talking about that they are Jews, they are not Jews. We've discuss this plenty before, going all the way back to Book of Joshua and going to the Book of Revelation, chapter 2:9 and 3:9. There are people on this earth that claim to be Jews but are not, but are actually the synagogue of Satan. And it's my belief that they have this book with them called the Talmud. All right. Do you want to comment before we move on?
No, but there was a time where the free press was it worked for the benefit of the people, and it did inform the public of the tyranny and also the political as far as the corruption and the things that the elites were involved in. Even JFK gave that whole speech about the secret societies and how they used the free press and how we needed a true free press in order to inform us of what was going on. And then, of course, he was murdered shortly after that. But he talked about the secret societies and how they worked in the darkness and in the shadows, and that they have been a political force to subjugate the masses for a very long time. And there was a time when the free press was beneficial before it was subjugated and made a strong arm of the elite, and was made a propaganda press to brainwash and to support that brainwashing. But there was a time, and it's unfortunate that we're not there anymore.
Absolutely. All right. Let's move on to protocol number 3. That was a relatively short one.
Wow. Awesome.
All right. This is methods of conquest and an overview of the symbolic snake, people's rights, liquidations of the Goyim, sovereign land of the world, universal economic crisis, ours they will not touch, and secret Masonic agents. All right. This should be interesting. The first time that we've actually seen the name Masonic, right?
Right.
Right. Today, I may tell you that our goal is now only a few steps off. There remains a small space to cross, and the whole long path we have trodden is ready now to close its cycle of the symbolic snake, by which we symbolize our people. When this ring closes, all the states of Europe will be locked into its coil as in a powerful vice. Interesting. I assume this was written before the EU was established.
Yes, it was.
Go on.
1800s again, remember.
The Constitution's scales of these days will shortly break down, for we have established them with a certain lack of accurate balance, in order that they may oscillate incessantly until they wear through the pivot on which they turn. It's so true. With the Supreme Court constantly, interpreting different.
Right.
You know what Biden said the other day? He said the Second Amendment is not absolute.
Right.
It's not absolute that you have a right to own weapons, to bear arms, to protect yourself. It's not absolute. How crazy is that? Did you see that when he said that? I was like, oh.
No, I didn't. It doesn't surprise me.
It's like when they were coming out with the hokey pokey mandates, he said it's not about freedom. Freedom. He laughed at freedom. It's like, what? This guy is the president of the American people, and you think he represents the American people? Like, I don't know. Maybe.
Go
ahead.
I was just gonna say, something that's kind of funny is that Dr. Fauci, who's been, had the snake bite and all the boosters and everything, he now has the C word.
You say that again? He had what?
He now has the C word. Yeah,
yeah.
You know, even after all the hokey pokeys.
Yeah.
I also saw something just really quickly about how Justin Bieber, half of his face is paralyzed because he was, you know, he also got the hokey pokey, and about how a bunch of people now are going blind, and they were talking about the possibility that by 2025, many of the people that did the hokey pokey, that they could end up, you know, dead. And who knows where things are going to go, but you just imagine those people losing their sight, their ability to see, and just from taking this thing. And it's horrible.
Yeah, and Andrew Gibson said, I highly doubt that Fauci took his own poison, right? Yeah,
Right.
probably true.
Oh yeah, true that. Yeah, they stage all that.
Yeah, they have
For
all
the
the
audiences.
you know, they had SIDS, right, for a long time, and now they have SADS. You heard about all that? The sudden adult death syndrome.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So crazy.
Yeah, there's mysterious amounts of adults randomly passing away before their time. It's unfortunate. But yeah, if you are curious about that, go back to our first couple episodes. We talk very thoroughly about. We'll probably talk a little bit more later. Let's continue
I'm
on.
sure it'll come up again, as they talk about that in the protocols too.
Yeah, so talking about the constitutions, you know, they're saying that, you know, all of this debating and the Supreme Court, it's going to go back and forth, and people are going to get tired of it. You know, people are going to be like, I need an absolute, and the only way that they're going to do that is when they establish their king, their despot king. You know,
right?
He's going to be the yes or
authority.
No.
Yes.
It says the Goyim are under the impression that they have welded them sufficiently strong, and they have all along kept on expecting that the scales would come into equilibrium. But the pivots, the kings on their thrones, are hemmed in by their representatives, who play the fool, distraught with their own uncontrolled and irresponsible power. And that, you know, this happens with all of the lobbying for the left and the right. You know, everyone is just like, their campaigns are funded by people, right? And the people who, you know, put them in power, they can push or pull them any way that they want. There's no equilibrium. I feel like that's a really interesting way to put it, though, that it's on a pivot. This power they owe to the terror which has been breathed into the palaces. As they have no means of getting at their people into their very midst, the kings on their thrones are no longer able to come to terms with them, and so strengthen themselves against seekers after power. We have made a gulf between the far-seeing sovereign power and the blind force of the people, so that both have lost all meaning. For, like the blind man and his sick, both are powerless apart. In order to incite seekers after power to a misuse of power, we have set all forces in opposition one to another, breaking up their liberal tendencies towards independence. To this end, we have stirred up every form of enterprise. I gotta go back to that. It says, you know, they have forces in opposition of each other, right? And they're breaking up their tendencies towards independence. It kind of makes me feel like, I don't know if I'm reading into this properly, but like they are establishing a civil war, you know, with the right wing, left wing, you know, and they are the ones that benefit when those types of things happen. But it's just something that they do, right?
Yes.
They prop up two different sides and then put them against each other.
Exactly. And they can have those two sides decimate each other and one another while they control and maintain their power, and those two sides never even understand the real mechanics of what's going on or who Oz is behind the mask.
Yep, really good point. All right, so let us on. To this end, we have stirred up every form of enterprise. We have armed all parties. We have set up authority as a target for every ambition. Of states, we have made gladiatorial arenas where a lot of confused issues contend. A little more, and disorders and bankruptcy will be universal. Babblers, inexhaustible, have turned into oratorical contests the sittings of parliament and administrative boards. Bold journalists and unscrupulous pamphleteers daily fall upon executive officials. Abuses of power will put the final touch in preparing all institutions for their overthrow, and everything will fly skyward under the blows of the maddened mob. Yeah, that's interesting. So they are trying to incite people against their governments. Apparently.
Yes, they do that. Also, that's part of the agenda.
Yeah.
Whenever it needs to be.
That definitely makes sense. You see that in all the Muslim nations, right? The Arab Spring.
Right. Exactly.
They just get fed up with their government, and then
they fund the rebellion.
Arm
the terrorists.
Exactly. And they are the ones that fund it all. For them to survive,
right.
They have to continue to be at the behest of those funding them. All people are chained down to heavy toil by poverty more firmly than ever. They were chained by slavery and serfdom. From these, one way or another, they might free themselves. These could be settled with, but from want they will never get away. We have included in the Constitution such rights as to the masses appear fictitious and not actual rights, and these so-called people's rights can exist only in an idea which can never be realized in practical life. What is it to the proletariat laborer, held double over his heavy toil, crushed by his lot in life, if talkers get the right to babble, if journalists get the right to scribble any nonsense side by side with good stuff? Once the proletariat has no other profit out of the Constitution save only those pitiful crumbs which we fling them from our table in return for their voting in favor of what we dictate, in favor of the men we place in power, the servants of our age and tour. Republican rights for a poor man are no more than a bitter piece of irony, for the necessity he is under of toiling almost all day gives him no present use of them, but the other hand robs him of all guarantee of regular and certain earnings by making him dependent on strikes by his comrades or lockouts by his masters. Interesting.
So true.
But yeah, people just can't beat the system, right? We're like they look at us as dogs just eating their crumbs.
Right.
And like we said, the 1% having more than the 99% combined, like, really is just crumbs.
Right.
Like, people who buy like a new Tesla or something, they're like laughing, they're like, that's nothing to them. When we were in Savannah, we went down to Savannah, Georgia, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, to visit the beach down in Tybee Island, which is a little bit south of there. But Savannah is like the oldest town in Georgia, and it's the only town that wasn't burned by General Sherman when he, during the Civil War, when he came through. He burned all of Georgia except for Savannah. It was the first capital of Georgia as well. But there, it's like, there's so much of this old money. It's crazy. Like some of the houses that are there, and then of course on the beach there are like these giant yachts, and you're just like, people pay so much money for those things. Like who has the type of money to pay for like, a $20 million boat? That's just crazy. That's crazy to think about. Whether there are people out there that do it, and then
that's nothing.
That's literally crumbs. Like the people that did buy that $20 million boat, they still are probably just like, they're not even near the level of the
Drop in
people
the
that are
bucket.
really on top. You know, the
Right.
Rothschilds, those types
Yes.
of families. You
Yeah,
know,
the ones that print the money.
right?
That's true power.
Yeah.
That's true wealth.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so let's see. We had, I guess the editor put in a note here that the people under our guidance have annihilated the aristocracy, who were their one and only defense and foster mother for the sake of their own advantage, which is inseparably bound up with the well-being of the people. There was an asterisk that said, not true. The covenant and God's laws and economic policy and the Torah are the only defense against all abuse and oppression. Interesting. Not sure who made this footnote, but a good point. You know, and you know, in the Most High's kingdom, that is what will be established. His rule will be established.
Right.
So nowadays, with the destruction of the aristocracy, the people have fallen into the grips of merciless, money-grinding scoundrels who have laid a pitiless and cruel yoke upon the necks of the workers. It's so true. Like business owners, a lot of business owners really abuse their employees so badly. I'm sure so many people have probably had bad managers or bad, you know, business owners that they worked for. It's like in the military, it was worst. There are so many terrible bosses. People are just so cruel.
It's like slavery.
It really is. It really is. It's unfortunate. And then to think that these people don't even look at us as human beings.
Right.
Shall we continue on? All right, verse 7. We appear on the scenes as alleged saviors of the worker from this oppression when we propose to him to enter the ranks of our fighting forces, socialist, anarchist, communist, to whom we always give support in accordance with an alleged brotherly rule of the solidarity of all humanity, our social masonry. The aristocracy which enjoyed by... Okay, let's actually go over here. I want to read this the verses that were quoted here. I'm going to pull them up real quick. Ezekiel 13:10. Okay, it says, because they have seduced my people, saying peace when there is no peace, and one builds a wall and they plaster it with untempered mortar, says to those who plaster it with untempered mortar that it will fall. Oh, say to those who plaster it with untempered mortar that it will fall. There will be flooding rain, and you, O great hailstones, shall fall down, and a stormy wind shall tear it down. Surely when the wall has fallen, will it not be said to you, where is the mortar with which you plastered it? Therefore thus says Yahuwah Elohim, I will cause a stormy wind to break forth in my fury, and there shall be a great flooding rain in my anger, and great hailstones in fury to consume it. So I will break down the wall you have plastered with an untempered mortar and bring it down to the ground so that its foundations will be uncovered. It will fall, and you shall be consumed in the midst of it. Then you shall know that I am Yahuwah. Thus will I accomplish my wrath on the wall and on those who have plastered it with untempered mortar, and I will say to you, the wall is no more, nor those who plastered it. That is, the prophets of Israel, who prophesy concerning Jerusalem, and who see visions of peace for her when there is no peace, says Yahuwah Elohim. That's an interesting quote. Let me read the next one from Matthew chapter 7, verse 23 through 27. It says, then I'll declare unto them, I never knew you, depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on a rock. Okay. Interesting. I guess that was another, like, editor's note. Because clearly the Jews would not quote from Matthew, right?
Yeah, the version that we, that I chose to include in this was one that was put out by a pastor and that he shared commentary. And it was one of the only versions that I could find, because there are a lot of versions out there, but none, that had like a perspective on the scriptures as it was going through. And so I thought that commentary was interesting, and I can't remember the pastor's name, but so it is inclusive of that kind of perspective. So it's unique in its writing in that manner.
Shout out to our mods. Thank you so much for taking care of business over there.
Yeah, it's a lot of chat going on.
Yeah. All right, moving on. The aristocracy, which enjoyed by law the labor of the workers, was interested in seeing that the workers, employees/slaves, were well fed, healthy, and strong. We are interested in just the opposite, in the diminution, the killing out of the goyim. Our power is in the chronic shortness of food and physical weakness of the worker, because by all that this implies he is made the slave of our will, and he will not find in his own authorities either strength or energy to set against our will. Hunger creates the right of capital to rule the worker more surely than it was given to the aristocracy by the legal authority of the king. So, talking about hunger and like shortages of food, like we don't see it as being a shortage of food, right? But honestly, compared to, I feel like, what the Most High, I guess the like old Israelites probably experienced, when thinking like an Amish type community where every family is growing food, right? And that's your job. You're just making food. But now, in order to get food, you have to make money.
Right.
You have to work to get money, and money is the only way that you get your food. And in a lot of places it's illegal to grow food in your front yard, and everywhere there's social pressure to have a nice kept lawn, for your neighbors to look at, and you're like, why are you growing grass?
Right.
Why are you growing grass? It's just grass. Like, grow something useful. Plant some like beautiful flowers as your cover crop. Like at least it'll bring the bees, the pollinators. Like grass to me is like so useless unless you have cows, unless you have like goats or sheep. But nobody has those.
Right.
How easy would it be though?
I was just gonna say, and then how we consider, the daisies of the field and the dandelion, which is such a superfood and can be utilized in many medicinal and healthy ways.
Just salads.
And and we think of it as a weed when it's actually beautiful. It's a beautiful yellow flower, and it's hardy. The Most High made it so that it could survive in many circumstances because it's such a good a food crop. And yet, everybody sprays it with poison to get rid of it because they consider it to be a nuisance weed. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, and then we, for the most part, like, kill off all the native plants everywhere, with weed killers. They call it weed killers.
Roundup.
Joy's mom, when she lived with us in California, I think it was 2014, she would just go by random lawns and pull dandelions out. Everybody sees it as a weed, right? She would just be like, I guess I'll take these dandelions. And she would make kimchi out of it. It was so good, so delicious, so good for you. But I guess this is as far as we're going to get tonight, probably, right here.
Yes, right.
The shortness of food, this is something that even more so is coming. Same thing with like the United Nations being like a stepping stone to the eventual like true NWO or Old World Order, whatever you want to call it, One World Order. That the shortness of food, of us not knowing how to grow food, of us just not growing food, that is a stepping stone to what is going to occur of people absolutely being out of food and having to be 100% reliant on
yes.
on these people, on the government, on the people who fund the government.
Right. Absolutely, and that's what they want. I mean, even with, what's going on with Russia and Ukraine and how they cut them off from the Black Sea, they're preventing them from exporting their grain. And that grain, like Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe in the same way that, America here in the Midwest, that they grow a lot of the food. And even like California used to be that same thing, the breadbasket of America, but because of their going through the crisis with the water, the farmers are not getting the irrigation that they used to grow food. So there's a crisis coming. And even early, we saw that, the government was paying farmers to destroy their crops. Mm-hmm. It's insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, love you, son.
All right.
Be blessed, all.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you, everybody, tonight. Shalom.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.